And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Sean M. Doyle, and I love the shortest bio I'll give you, and I'll get into a little bit, is Sean describes himself as a writer, a thinker, a speaker, and a consultant, so right in our alley. He spent 27 years running a B2B sales and marketing consultancy. He's worked with over 5,000 sales and marketing consulting engagements over his 30-ish year career. He's an author of a book called Shift, 19 Practical Business-Driven Ideas for an Executive in Charge of Marketing, but Not Trained for the Task. We've seen this movie. So anyway, welcome aboard, Sean. You check like all the boxes of fun folks we like to talk with. So I'll ask you sort of one of my favorite first questions is, how the hell did you get here? Like, obviously it was linear and logical and deliberate and planned.
Oh, wow. Well, gosh, I was orphaned in Siberia. No, I don't have anything that interesting. Yeah, no, I was born the son of an admission director, which if you're ever in the college admission world, then you know that really is marketing and sales. And grew up with communication arts and all those kind of classic magazines laying around and just listening to sales and how do you recruit and get people in and those kind of conversations, and just was fascinated with that. Went through a journey of going into the fine arts world and actually have a degree in photography, which is absolutely useless. It's fun though. It's fun. I'm now a grandfather, so I'm kind of loving that again. But we realized I wanted to be when the art department voted me most likely to be a business major, I thought maybe they were signaling something. So I went over to the dean of the business school and said, hey, I'm not going to be a photographer. Help me figure this out. And ended up with this career in marketing and sales and have loved it. Probably the most pivotal moment that adds any value to your listener, and I think is the promise for today, was in 2002 when I went from running marathons to couldn't walk the stairs of the house and had to understand or had to get diagnosed with a really serious chronic illness. And I've done really well. I'm doing well today. And here I am. But through that journey, I learned about James Prochaska's trans-theoretical theorem of behavioral change. Okay, all your listeners just went to sleep.
Right.
It's an incredible book. Changing for Good is the layman's version of the research and the science. And it changed everything about the way I understand what I do when I'm helping people with sales and marketing. So it gives me a point of view that's not just some marketing schmuck who thinks something or other, but it's a science-based. It's a proven behavioral science model that we apply. So it helps me understand. And in fact, I was thinking about today, Peter, and thinking about what your listeners are all really smart people. I'm not going to outsmart anybody, but I think I have some idea. Everybody has had some piece of thought leadership that didn't get traction. I'm going to be really transparent today, right? I've had thought leadership that didn't get any traction in the marketplace the way I knew it should, because I knew it was a good idea. And that's what I'd love to talk to you about today. And I can apply behavioral science.
So let's stay there for a minute, because I think that's an interesting piece. I think that by and large, we are the worst judges of what will stick and what won't. Like, so there's something that you toil over for weeks or months, or you have this epiphany in the shower and you think, oh my God, this is going to, this is my world is round theory and this is going to be it. And then you put it out there and then there's crickets. And then there's other times you put something out there and you're like, I'm almost embarrassed to hit send because this is like, a drunken tweet. It doesn't really, it's whatever, but I got to get something out. And you put it out there and that's the thing. I don't know if we're allowed to say go viral anymore post-COVID or wherever.
You're not.
But
You're not.
That's the thing that explodes. And you're like, geez, okay. And so to me, I think that traction I think there's two sides to this. There's what can you do to accelerate and increase the traction, but also not be so damn stubborn and say, listen, when the market tells you something, shut up and listen.
I'm going to move past stubborn. I think it's egotistical. I'm going to go ahead and punch everybody in the nose, right? So I can remember the exact story that you're talking about, where I got invited to speak at a conference in Denver, and I was a young guy and young speaker, and I was so excited. And it was before I learned that the guy that speaks at noon on Friday is the lowest level, worst guy, because ain't nobody coming. So
if he doesn't show up, the valet parker is going to do kumbaya.
Right. Yeah, and it will probably be just as good. So,
and just as well attended. Yeah. Yeah.
well, so I'm sitting in front of this room after laboring, working, thinking, writing, reading, da 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 da. And there's, 5 people there. I guess they had late flights and nothing better to do, or lack of curiosity or
Well, two of them
imagination
might have
or
been
something.
homeless, right? So,
There was free coffee. So
yeah,
that could
exactly.
have been
Yeah.
it. So that's a humbling moment. But I think the thing is that all that time I was thinking about myself. That's why nobody came. I mean, yeah, the time slot was terrible. But if I would have been thinking about other people, if I would have been having a conversation that was relevant to them, I could have worn a t-shirt to the talk and it could have been the worst time slot and it should have been the best attended. I think that one of the things we've got to do as thought leaders is get out of our own way and quit talking to ourselves. The maxim, the joke at least that we say is in life, people who talk to themselves, we call crazy. In business, we call it marketing, right?
Yeah.
So,
So, but stay there for a minute. So I
yeah.
think that back in the days, and they weren't all that long ago, where there was a lot of speaking out there, right? So
Hmm.
a lot of conferences, people doing 50, 100 gigs a year, whatever. We're not back there yet. Who knows if we ever get back there? That's a whole nother conversation. But there were a lot of keynoters that did what I would call a drive-by keynote. They show up 20 minutes before the event, pop on the mic, go in. Hello, ladies and gentlemen from, fill in the blank, Cleveland,
Right.
and I hope, blah, blah, blah. They use the word customer instead of client. And it felt like, not bespoke, to say the least. It felt like
Right.
they were, rushed. They're, it's about them. Let me show you how great I am. And they hold up their New York Times best-selling book and tell you about their accolades and blah, blah, blah. And I think those days are largely over for those folks. It's the other
Agreed.
focused speaker, the speaker that gets up there and says, listen, there's lots of things I've done, but what can I give you today? We have an hour together,
Yep.
and here's what I've thought would be of value to you and why. And I've done my homework, and I know about the trials and tribulations and the history and the heritage and the culture of your organization.
Yeah, it's just lazy to do that, right? It's
Yeah.
laziness. And my friend Scott True, Agent Scott True at the Secret Service, asked me the question once, like, how do you think we train to identify fake dollar bills or fake $100 bills? And I said, well, you study the best people, the best forgers, you learn from them. And he said,
Sure.
actually, that's wrong. You don't. All you study is the real thing. So, as humans, we're taught, right? We learn who the fakers are. We learn who the scumbag sales guy is. We learn who the bad speakers are. And we can spot a fake because we know the authentic thing when we see it. And that's why some people have such resonance. That's why some people are just drawn to them. It's not that we've been taught. We've seen the fakes, and the Secret Service has seen the fakes, but they know how to identify the real thing just like we do as humans, right? So I love to
So,
think,
stay there for a
yeah,
minute, because I think that theme during COVID, right? So a great keynoter or someone that's great at anything mastered the art of keynoting. So everything about that was choreographed perfectly. The music that set the tone when you walked into the
energy,
ballroom,
yeah,
the
lots of energy,
energy, the
yeah,
lights, when the lights come up, when they walk, the intro, all that sort of stuff. And then all of a sudden, the rug gets taken out from under all of us, and we're thrown into Zoom world. And what we realized at first is like, Sean's not wearing a suit and tie. Oh, Sean's looking pretty casual in his house today. And it's like, actually, he still has a lot to say. Like,
mm,
actually, it's kind of neat seeing, look at him as a native environment. It's like we're at the zoo of Sean, you know what I mean? And
right,
I think
right.
this authenticity piece has become a big deal right now. And I don't see us going back to that more formal, if I'm in my office, I have to act and believe and behave a certain way.
I told my wife the other day that I've got upstairs in my closet, I've got probably a dozen suits that at least 10 of them just need to go away. I'll never wear
Right,
those
right,
guys
right,
again.
right.
So
Exactly.
yeah, I think that spotting that authentic thing, and we definitely do dress ourselves up emotionally, physically, and intellectually, right? The looking overhead and saying, "Welcome, Cleveland." That's a very shallow dress up that I cared enough about you to come prepared. And what's worse is the band or the speaker who says, "Welcome, Cleveland," but they're
They're
in
in Denver.
Dallas, right? They're not there. So, yeah, that's a real challenge. So, yeah, I think if we could quit talking to ourselves, people are smart. They recognize a fake, and really talking to yourself is boring. The worst date I ever had in my life was with I won't name the state so I don't get in trouble, but I got to go out with Miss fill in the blank in college. It was the worst date of my life. She was beautiful. Other people were sending the woman drinks. which was a little offensive to me, but it's like a signal that you're with somebody pretty attractive. But it was a horrible date. I would never, about an hour in, I was like, this was a huge mistake. I don't think she noticed it was a huge mistake. She didn't even notice me. I wasn't even there, right? The subject was her, and that was the only thing that we could talk about. Well, if that's your thought leadership, then that's boring. It's just a boring thing.
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts. Stay on that as it relates to the thought leadership, because I think that a legitimate challenge that a lot of thought leaders have is they may very well be literally the smartest person in the universe or one of the top 20 in their space, whatever that space may be, right? It could be resilience or creativity, and it doesn't matter, but they're clearly top of their game. They might be a bit introverted. So they might be a bit, I don't want to say shy, because they're probably not shy, but how do you develop the capabilities to be so other focused, right? To say, wait a minute, I've got all this domain expertise. What is Sean doing? What is the problem that he needs to solve that I can be helpful with?
Yeah, that's great. That's an incredibly valuable question. So I've got two answers to it. The first one is, I would call it the art of the second question. So once you even learn to ask the question, right, to say, hey, this is what I'd like to learn from you. The first question is good. Peter, what was for breakfast? What's the biggest thing that's worrying you? Whatever that question is. The second question is the juicy insight, right? The art of the second question. So once you get that answer, now you've got a framework. And that first question allows me to understand a little bit of where you're coming from. Now, if I'm smart, I can use that and identify the second question. So it forces me as a listener, whether I'm a speaker in an audience talking before an event, or if I'm interviewing somebody, if I can ask the first question, which is going to, by nature, is going to have to come from my expertise, because I know something that you should know. In fact, so I run a marketing sales consultancy, right? Yep. So if somebody calls and says, hey, do you want to run your business more efficiently? I shut down, because that's boring. That's a boring question. And if somebody says,
well, it's a stupid question. No, I'd like it to be as
right.
as inefficient as the least amount of efficiency as possible for we to keep the doors open.
And someone's been taught to answer that question. I'd say a poor sales coach or a poor marketer has taught them to say those stupid questions. But what a better question when someone calls and says, hey, what is your billing per FTE? If it's over $200 per $250,000 per FTE, you're one of the highest performing agencies in the country. If you're under that, I've got some expertise that could help you get there. Are you interested in that conversation? Now, man, you've spoken to me like that's a metric I know. That's something I watch. It's a benchmark. It gives me the ability to look at others. I'm interested now in a conversation. I'll take that call. Because that second question was about me, not about you saying, I've got expertise. Let me tell you about me. I'm asking a question about you and your business. And that's fascinating to me. That second question, if I say yes, now the question can turn, right? Now the question can be, well, how many FTEs do you have? What do you think the problem is? Why? What's the best you ever performed? And that's where that juicy insight's going to come from. That's going to give
it's a much richer conversation than being on the receiving end of someone's on bullet point number 5. I was recently on a call with someone and they were walking us through their deck, and I said, okay, I got it. No need to I knew there were 11 more pages to go. I've got 3 questions for you. And they couldn't get off the deck. Okay, I'll get to your questions, but that's on page 17. I'm like, no, I've got the question now. I got it. I don't need, need the crutch of the deck. I want to stay on where you went though. So I think for a lot of thought leaders, staying on let's call it the theoretical, the science of, or the gravitas of, that's their comfort zone. That's what they know. They've researched it, they know, whatever. But being able to sort of in the moment, in an improv way, move it to applied for Sean in this moment right now. That takes a lot of work. Like that question that you just put out there, immediately I can envision someone going 250,000 per head. Do I even know what that number is? Whoops, that's a problem.
Right.
Oh, if that number's lower, how much lower? Is it close? If the number's a lot higher, I'm going, I'm great, right? Like, so
Yeah, right.
immediately they can't help but start doing some math in their head, which means we're at least engaged in a conversation. So tell me how you develop those, let's call them the improv skills to take it from the theoretical to the applied, because theoretical is the encyclopedia that stays on the shelf. Who cares?
Exactly. So, but we've all been taught as keynoters or as thought leaders to teach principles. I love listening to Dan Ariely talk
Sure.
about the principles. It's incredible. It's on my bucket list is to meet him one
Yep.
day. There's a short list of them, and he's definitely high on it. Fascinating person. Now, the book is great. It's most recently is sitting over there, and it's, how do I apply it? That's a whole separate question. So, and I think there's a challenge in saying, as a thought leader, is your job to find application or is it to frame the question? And I think the behavioral science journey will inform this. So if
Yeah.
your intent as a thought leader is to help people change their behavior, to do something a different way, then you need to understand the journey that somebody goes on. So in the beginning, I think one of the reasons a lot of thought leadership doesn't get any traction, one, the conversation's about yourself, not the other person. The second thing
Sure.
is, and this is a key in marketing and sales, awareness is not the problem typically. People don't need more awareness. The Ford Edsel did not need more awareness, right? Everybody in the country knew the Ford Edsel was out. So what happened? They spent more money. And I did an equation once. I don't remember the number, but it was billions in today's dollars in our marketing campaign.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't work, right? So what was wrong? It wasn't awareness. So I think that the key is something called consciousness raising. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
difference between being something's aware and raising my consciousness. So if you can, as a thought leader, help people raise consciousness, for example, I'll go back to the 250,000 per FTE billing ratio. Well, that raised my consciousness. You just said it raised your consciousness, right? Oh wow, I'm underperforming, I'm overperforming. That's not even a metric I use. That's
Yeah.
I
Right.
didn't I
Right.
didn't I hadn't even framed that idea. So a great thought leader raises consciousness, not creates awareness. Now, to get somebody through the journey of moving to change behavior, there's many steps, right? So most good thought leaders will take people through emotional arousal. They're going to get people excited
Mm-hmm.
emotionally. They're going to force people to rationally reevaluate. Like, hey, if I could get to that number, we could bill more. We could, I could make more. I could get to the lake house. I could go down to the beach with famous people, like Peter. So we could have all kinds of amazing things going on. And then later stage, there's things that will matter, like countering. Here's a different way. Here's how you could approach that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a reward for approaching that behavior. Here's helping behaviors. Here's helping relationships. It's consultants. Your business is actually, you took me through that journey on your website because I didn't really understand what you did. I'm pretty interested in your offering now because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't, I've been that guy with the thought leadership. And what I read your promise is, help me from a third party point of view pull all this stuff together into codified brand
So
singular focused position,
it's
right?
it's interesting that you say that. Not necessarily about art, my side, although I appreciate that. Is that I did a piece recently, and it was based on a couple interactions with clients and such, where I think almost the highest level compliment you can get as a thought leader is you produce this piece, video, audio, a book, or an article, whatever, and it felt like you did it just for me, right? It felt like almost as
Right.
almost if it was so bespoke, it was an email summarizing a call or a meeting we had. But I read this article that you wrote, and oh my God, that's me. You get me, you understand it,
Right.
whatever. And I think that is a challenge that thought leaders have, where far too often they try to speak to everyone. And when you're
Mm.
trying to please everyone, you please no one. Right. And if you know who your clients are, who the avatars are, who that I'm a realist. 99.99% of the world couldn't care if we existed or not as a business. That 0.0001, whatever that math is, we stay up all day and night thinking out, how do we connect with them? How do we become relevant to them? How do we serve them? Right. And realize the rest are
And
irrelevant.
right. So I always say the positioning is the foundation upon which all sales and marketing occurs. And that's what you just said. So that narrow view, that understanding of a piece of the world gives you the ability to recognize patterns. Once you recognize
Yep.
patterns, then you can write that insightful article that does reach a group where they go, wow, you can see in my soul. I think one thing over time that I've learned that is incredibly frustrating is really how simple we are as people.
Yeah, we're not that complicated.
How is it that you could take a DISC test or any of the personality tests or work style? Ask 10 questions and then you go, oh wait, how did you know that about me? I just answered 10 simple questions. And that tells me that there's patterns across humanity. There's patterns across people. That understanding that niche, that thought leadership applied to, I think that it starts to bridge that question of how do you take concepts and help people with application. I also think that one reason you hire a consultant is the nuances of that application, because the complexity of the world, as simple as people are, the complexity of the world requires thought in how to change the culture, how to change people. Totally. So that's where it is worth spending money on a consultant. I think a good thought leader raises consciousness, and then they might demonstrate emotional and rational ways that it'll make a difference to you. And then at some point, you've got to have practical help.
Exactly.
Because you move into out of the principle and into the application.
Yep. And I think, and we'll wrap in a moment here, that a helpful way to get there, which is sort of counterintuitive, is the more constraints that you have, the more it helps, right? If you put constraints and say, I only care about, whatever, mid-cap technology companies on their third round of funding that are going through these sort of things. Okay, that's a really, really tight constraint, but you can go really, really deep on, well, what are their challenges? Is it hiring? Is it P&L? Is it raising that neck? Like whatever. There's only 5 or 6 things that really, 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 really matter to them, and you can nail it.
So the Academy of Landscape Architecture did a study. They took a corner lot.
That's not the Academy they thank at the Oscars, is it? It's a different Academy?
I think it's a different one.
Okay, I was just checking.
It involves more plants, yeah.
Okay.
They took a corner lot in a neighborhood on a busy intersection, and they put a playground in the back corner and watched 30, 40 kids play. And those kids kind of stayed around the playground. Then they put up boundaries. They put up perimeter. They put up a fence. And then they put another 20, 30 kids out and watched them play. Those kids played out to the edges. They played in the whole area because there was safety. So there's a human truth to what you just said, Peter. There is a human truth to the idea that boundaries increase creativity. Boundaries increase effectiveness. Yep. It makes your playground bigger. I think our sinful, if we want to get into theology, let's go, man. But our sinful self says, I don't want those boundaries. That's just going to constrain me.
I need my freedom. Right.
Yeah. And I hate it. Listen, as a guy that spent his life in marketing and sales, if I see one more client come in and say, we need blue sky thinking, like that's the worst advice ever.
Outside the box. Let's go outside the box again.
I need a box. Give me a box.
Exactly.
I need to know your financial constraints. I need to know your resources. I need to know what you're capable of. I need to know what your customer buys. I need to know what you're willing to spend to execute this. I need to know all this stuff. I'm working for a $100 million company that wants 25% net income basis, and I made a huge mistake, or growth, not basis, 25% growth. I made a huge mistake in not clearly identifying what the resources were available. Come to find out, they don't have enough of a sales team to execute on that, and they don't have any marketing infrastructure to execute on that. So the bell tolls, and that is it. So
thank you, Sean. Well, this has been fantastic. I appreciate your time and your insight, and this has been great. Thank you so much,
Peter. I hope this added value to your listeners. You have a great podcast. Love listening.
Thank you. To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.